Good afternoon, everybody. I don't have anything off the top, Matt, so if you want to kick us off.
Top at all.
Nothing off the top.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just start with the situation in the Middle East. And what's your understanding of where things stand at the moment?
Well, Matt, we continue to work closely with partners in Egypt and Qatar. Our understanding is that they are still pressing their Hamas interlocutors to see that any gaps that exist as it relates to the ceasefire deal that we've been talking about for so long, that there might be ways to close that gap, and we're still hopeful, and we're watching that space very closely. The president and the secretary were clear when they laid this out. We believe that this three-phase ceasefire proposal that Israel has made to Hamas and that the UN Security Council has endorsed is the best way to end the violence in Gaza and ultimately end the conflict. And we're continuing to push to try and close this deal.
Right, but you've seen the latest from Hamas that they don't, that it's not good enough, right?
Matt, I'm not going to get into the ins and
I'm
outs.
not asking you to get into it. Have you seen it?
I'm not aware of a recent proposal or communication from Hamas aside from the one a number of weeks ago. But again, I'm not going to negotiate or get into the back and forth on this publicly. What I will just say, and again, is that our viewpoint is that the time for haggling is over and it's time for a ceasefire. We and our partners agree that the deal it has to be grounded in the principles of the ceasefire proposal that the entire international community already supports. And Hamas has previously agreed to similar iterations of this proposal, so they need to sign on to the version that was shared in front of them.
Okay. And then last one, just on the north, or Israel's north, Lebanon's south.
Yep.
What's your current concern about the possibility of a broader conflict there?
So I don't have a prognosis to offer, Matt, but restoring the calm along the blue line, it continues to remain a top priority for us, and it must be of utmost importance to Lebanon and Israel as well. We continue to be concerned by the level of violence, and we're continuing to work towards a diplomatic solution that would allow Israeli and Lebanese citizens to return their homes and live in peace and security. When the president laid out that ceasefire that we were just talking about, Matt, he said in his remarks that a ceasefire and a hostage deal in Gaza will accelerate the possibility of progress, including lasting security among Israel's northern border with Lebanon. And so that's something we're going to continue to work towards.
Thank you.
Leon.
Just to follow up on Gaza, what do you make of the evacuation orders, again, that were released today in Khan Yunis and Rafah? You've always said that you were against all displacement of populations, and poor Palestinians have been going up, down, east, west, and now again they had just fled, now they came back, now they have to leave again. What do you make of those orders today?
So, of course, Leon, when it comes to one of our key tenets of this conflict, the Secretary was very clear in Tokyo that there can be no permanent displacement of Gazans. Of course, over the course of this military operation that the IDF is conducting, and I will let them speak to specific logistical parameters, as those operations are being conducted, it is of course pertinent that civilians and non-militants be asked to appropriately evacuate for safety concerns. But again, these are all logistical parameters that the IDF can speak to. When it comes to the tenet of how we've been talking about Rafah, there has been no change in our policy. We continue to believe that any major military incursion into Rafah we would be opposed to, but yet we have yet to see any kind of incursion to take place thus far. Camilla.
Thank you. Just back to Lebanon, we've seen a couple of alerts go out from US Embassy Beirut over the last few days, and the most recent today was one about flight restrictions. Can you just give us a little bit more detail at all on or any kind of insight into possible preparations for for Americans as things continue to be very tense on the border there? I know that you can't get into too much detail, but what can we expect in terms of like the kind of options that state has to help Americans if need be and needs to pivot there last minute?
So let me say a couple things. First, for those who may not be tracking, the country of Lebanon as a whole currently is at the travel advisory warning level of level 3, reconsider travel. But the specific region of southern Lebanon is at a level 4. It's at a level 4 do not travel level, as is Lebanon's border with Syria, as well as refugee settlements throughout Lebanon. We undertake this kind of work and planning at all of our first, let me say that when it comes to our travel advisory warnings, we make those assessments and changes based on circumstances on the ground, and we'll continue to assess what situations are like should there need to be any kind of change in travel advisory warning. When it comes to supporting American citizens, we have no higher priority than the safety and security of U.S. citizens overseas. And in many countries, the security environment remains complex and can change quickly. Any citizen traveling abroad anywhere, our message to them has always been that they should enroll in Smart Traveler to be best informed about any communication from the U.S. government. We also encourage that in Lebanon that U.S. citizens have their own departure plans in place, and we don't have any announcement to make on any evacuation of private citizens from Lebanon. But what I can say is that the U.S. government remains diligent in planning and preparing for any and all possible emergency contingencies. And this is work that happens not just in Lebanon, but at all of our diplomatic facilities, at our embassies and consulates around the world. This is what we do, and it's part of our contingency planning. But I wouldn't speak to any more specifics beyond that.
And just given that these alerts have gone out in the last few days or within a week, do we read that as there has been an escalation in the past few days, or is this just a culmination of
this is the State Department and the U.S. government wanting to offer American citizens in the country and in the region, and those who may have loved ones in the country and the region, to have the most informed information as possible and have the best avenues to stay in touch with the U.S. government. Nick.
Different region, but somewhat related.
Can I see if anybody else has anything else, then I will come back to you. Simon, did you have?
No, on this region.
Okay. Kylie, go ahead.
It was reported over the weekend that the U.S. proposed new language to bridge the gaps. You were saying you've been working to bridge the gaps between Hamas and Israel for a hostage release and ceasefire. Can you share with us if that new proposal was signed off on by Israel before the U.S. put it forth, or did you guys share it with both sides, like just where that stands at this moment?
So I'm not going to get into the specifics of where we are in our conversations with Israel and other regional partners. I will leave it at what I said to Matt, that our partners in Qatar and Egypt continue to press Hamas interlocutors on ways to close this gap. The president, the secretary have all been engaged on this directly, and we continue to feel strongly that the ceasefire proposal that the president laid out a number of weeks ago continues to be the best way to get a surge in humanitarian assistance, release all the remaining hostages, and perhaps most importantly, get us on a path to greater and broader diplomatic conversations that has the potential to get this region out of these countless cycles of violence that we've been experiencing.
So no time frame for expectations as to when they...
No, I wouldn't speak to time frames with the specifics of the deliberations from up here.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead.
Thank you, Vedant. Secretary Blinken today at Brookings stressed again the need for a plan for the day after, and without it, it will be chaos and he's also said that there's 3 things that the U.S. will not accept: Israeli occupation, Hamas getting back to power, or chaos. But what we hear from the Israeli government all the time, that they are not ready yet to discuss such plans, and they don't want this Gaza Strip to be ruled by Hamas or even the PLO. And we know that you've been stated many times, you or Matt, that you are stressing the Israelis and keep talking with them about this. Did you reach anywhere with them? Are they gonna talk to you about their future plans for the day after?
So we have stressed the importance of there being some plans for the day after. This is nothing new. This is something that the Secretary has been engaged on for a number of months now, and it's been a key piece of the shuttle diplomacy that he's been engaged on in the region. It's not for me to speak to the Israelis or to the foreign policy and the policies that they're interested in pursuing, but what I can say from our perspective is that in every conversation that we've had with our partners in Israel and other regional partners, we have stressed the principles that the Secretary laid out in Tokyo last fall, and part of that we have stressed that there is a responsibility to have a plan for a day after to ensure that these things can come to fruition, that Hamas can no longer use Gaza as a springboard for terrorism on the Israeli people, that Israel can no longer be an occupying power for Gaza, that we get us on a path to a diplomatic solution and get us on a path to two states that have equal measures of integrity and security for Israelis and Palestinians. And these are conversations we'll continue to have.
But are they susceptible to this push? Because publicly they seems not.
It should come as no surprise that over the course of this conflict, we of course had policy disagreements and with our partners in Israel, but we'll continue to engage on these conversations. But we have stressed at every turn that there is a responsibility and a need to make sure that there is a plan for a day after. Michelle, go ahead.
Vedant, Arab League Assistant Secretary General has said during the weekend that the League's member states concurred that the labeling of Hezbollah as a terrorist organization should no longer be employed. Do you agree with the Arab League on this?
So I've seen those reports, Michelle, and we're looking into them, but let me just say unequivocally that there is no question that Hezbollah remains a dangerous terrorist organization and a destabilizing force in the Middle East. We believe that there is no reason to take steps to remove such a designation, and we have continued to urge governments around the world to designate, ban, or restrict Hezbollah. 16 governments from across the world have heeded this call since 2019, and we'll continue to have those conversations. But again, I just want to reiterate, in our point of view, Hezbollah remains a very dangerous terrorist organization.
Thank you.
Simon, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, just moving to a slightly separate subject, just since this is the first briefing you've had since the debate on Thursday, there's obviously been a lot of responses over the President's performance. I know this isn't the White House, but I also want to note that the Secretary doesn't have any events this week where we'll have a chance to ask him directly, so this is a forum to try and ask. And he was asked about this morning, not by a journalist, I should say, at Brookings Institution, about, globally there has been as well as domestically, there has been some response to the President's performance on the debate stage. It's raising some questions about his ability to lead, to respond to crises. From this building's point of view, is there anything you want to say in response to that?
I think Secretary Blinken laid out our point of view on this pretty clearly, and so I would just echo what he said. And to give just a snippet, the Secretary was pretty clear and succinct that the world and world leaders know the President. They know the policies that he pursues and he champions, and they like and believe in the policies that we're pursuing. Next week, the Washington area has the great opportunity to host NATO leaders for the 75th NATO summit, which I think will be another opportunity to talk about this administration's commitment to having a seat at a table, and this administration's commitment to showing that American engagement matters. And so we'll continue to have those conversations. But I will leave punditry and electioneering to others in DC.
Have you had any contacts from allies or other countries, expressing concern over this performance and asking to sort of for reassurance?
Again, I have no diplomatic conversations to speak to, but I will just echo again that world leaders know this president, and they know this is a president who has worked at the cross-section of foreign policy for decades, and they know and believe in the policies that he and this administration are pursuing.
Well, leaving aside the punditry and electioneering, what was your reaction? What was the reaction of this building?
Matt, it's really not appropriate for me to be offering any commentary on something like a debate from up here, and I think you've been covering the State Department long enough to know
But
that.
the question's got to be asked.
I appreciate you asking it, I guess, but I'm going
no,
to
you
politely.
actually don't appreciate
I'm going
me
to.
asking.
No,
Yeah,
Matt. I do
that was
appreciate.
clear from your
I do
response.
appreciate
No,
any
no, you
question you
don't.
ask,
And
but I will
appreciate is
politely.
a much overused word.
I will politely decline
Okay, fair
to
enough.
comment
But
on.
so to follow up on something, you heard absolutely nothing. You're not aware of anything that any foreign government has said since Thursday night to you or to anyone you're not aware of about what happened.
That is correct.
Nothing.
Correct.
Okay.
One more question.
Go ahead.
And this building, have you guys given any guidance to your top diplomats who are serving in a political capacity because they've been picked by this president in terms of how they should be answering questions about if Biden will remain the nominee from their interlocutors overseas?
People who are employees of the State Department, whether they are Schedule C, whether they are a presidentially nominated person in that position, are well aware of what their roles and responsibilities are in speaking to domestic politics in any kind of official capacity.
So that's not a yes or a no?
Go ahead, Sam.
I have another question, but, tagging onto the debate question, is it some concern in this building that not just a lot of the international community, but even former President Trump said that, no, Israel is the one that's, ensuring that the attack in Gaza continues? Is there some concern that there's going to be a broader consensus, contrary to the claims of the State Department, the administration, that Hamas is the holdup here?
I'm not sure I fully understand your question, Sam. What exactly are you asking?
Well, there was some substance in the debate, and
As there tend to be in presidential debates.
and Trump and Biden depicted Hamas as the lone holdout for preventing a stop to the fighting, and Trump said, no, actually, Israel is the holdout, and then he quickly added that that it should continue to kill Palestinians. So although he took a very militaristic perspective, he actually acknowledged the underlying truth shared by a great deal of the international community, that in fact it is Israel that is holding up a stop to the conflict. That must be a concern to you?
It is not. Any person on any particular debate stage is, of course, entitled to whatever opinion they want. When it comes to the current ongoing conflict in Gaza, we remain incredibly committed of continuing to work with partners in Qatar, partners in Egypt, partners in Israel, to see what can be done to close the gap as it relates to the ceasefire proposal that the president laid out a number of weeks ago. We continue to believe that that is the best path forward to get hostages released, to get a surge of humanitarian aid into Gaza, and as well as to get us onto a path of diplomacy to have greater conversations for peace and stability in the region. I want to come back to Biden real quick because I did not mean to be so flippant in moving on. I was just trying to work through the room. So again, just to let me reiterate, we have not provided or provisioned any guidance from the State Department to talk about any issues as it relates to domestic politics outside of on an annual basis, bureaus within the State Department and through the interagency create materials to how to talk about elections in the democracy context, but not in a, the offering punditry or analysis. So again, I just want to reiterate that any person serving in any capacity, in an official capacity, whether they are a foreign service officer, a civil service officer, a Schedule C employee, or a Senate confirmed position, are well aware of what and whether they are ambassadors or not, are well aware of what is acceptable to talk about while wearing their official duties when they are representing the department in an official capacity. Nick.
You said you weren't aware of any particular foreign reaction to the debate, but the Polish foreign minister tweeted afterwards, among other things, with like a reference to the Roman Empire, it's important to manage one's ride into the sunset. So do you have any reaction to that? And then I've got a separate question.
You should ask the Polish foreign minister. I think I've exhaustively spoken to this political issue to the extent that I can. I really don't have any other commentary to offer.
Okay.
Well, I don't think you've spoken exhaustively about riding into the sunset.
That is true. That is true. I will let you ask your follow-up.
Okay, kind of
Right.
same region and tangentially related
Yeah.
to the Lebanon questions. U.S. bases in Europe were put on heightened alert over the weekend. Are there any concerns about U.S. citizens there, or is this limited to military personnel, or is there any increased danger?
So on installations, I will let my colleagues at the Department of Defense speak to any posture change or anything as it relates to their facilities. What I can say about our embassies and consulate is that there has been no change in operating status of missions in the region. We, of course, closely monitor and evaluate threat information and adjust our security and operating postures accordingly. I will also say that we have a pretty strong track record of adjusting and our operating procedure swiftly when needed. So I just don't have any assessment to offer at this time. Like I said, our diplomatic facilities continue to be under the same posture that they were.
And one more on Europe.
Yeah.
Do you have any reactions to the first round of French parliamentary elections? And separately, Hungarian Prime Minister Orban said that he is now forming an alliance with right-wing groups in Austria and the Czech Republic. They're calling it the Patriots of Europe, and that it would be the largest right-wing group in Europe.
So on your second question, I don't, and on your first question, I'm just not going to get ahead of the French process. What I can say is that France is a vital partner. It's our oldest ally with whom we have a long and proud history of democratic values. We have full confidence that and strength in France's democratic institutions and processes, and we intend to continue our close collaboration with the French government across the full spectrum of foreign policy priorities.
Can I just go back to the embassy question?
Sure.
Europe, you said there's no change in operating status, but is there any change at all?
There is none.
Security status?
There is
There's
none. There is
So-
none.
So all embassies are open, there isn't like a heightened security?
Well, whether they're open or not, Matt, I'd have to go through a litany of lists. But to Nick's question, in linking it to the
Yeah.
status and posture.
Related to this,
Correct,
there's no-
no.
there-
There's been no
there's no
change
change.
linked to that,
All right,
correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. Camilla.
Also related, just out of interest, with the reporting is that the U.S. military bases are on heightened alert and pretty high level of alert. Some reporting saying the highest in 10 years. Is it normal for U.S. military bases to be put on such high alert and there to be no change in security status for embassies? Is that?
Well, I think we go down a rabbit hole of whether military installations and diplomatic facilities are necessarily always in the exact same place or not, which isn't always the case. So
Just as a precaution.
what I just don't want to get into hypotheticals. What I can say is that as it relates to our embassies and consulates, there is no change in operating status of missions that we have in the region. But when it comes to travel advisory warnings, when it comes to the safety and security of our citizens and our diplomats, when it comes to the operating status of our facilities, whether they are embassies or consulates, this is something that we closely monitor and evaluate, and it's something that we monitor and evaluate in real time, and we have the ability to adjust our security and operating postures accordingly. We have the ability to do that swiftly when necessary, but I just have no updates for you in any posture change on our end.
Okay, and just while I'm going to defer to other people who might have questions on the Middle East region.
Okay.
Come back to you.
All right. Shannon.
Thank you. Same topic really, but the worldwide caution alert that is in place right now, specifically advising the LGBTQI+ community that they could be at an increased risk of threat traveling abroad through the month of June. It seems to be more focused on Pride celebrations. As we enter July, does the State Department believe that threat has lifted or will begin to lift?
I have no, first let me just say I have no updates on that pride, and I'm saying this broadly, sometimes it is observed at different times of the year, depending on what country you are in. I understand that also to be the case sometimes in the various communities within the United States as well. So no, I have nothing to preview in terms of changing our posture there. Jalil, go. Actually, hold on. Before I come to you, Alex has had his hand up. I'll come back to you. Go ahead. Yeah.
This was about the president's leadership at the NATO summit next week. President Zelensky gave an interview to the U.S. outlet yesterday. He said that the U.S. doesn't see Ukraine in NATO today because he said the U.S. is afraid to, quote-unquote, annoy Putin. I know you guys have talked about some sort of breach in the upcoming summit. Why is it not convincing enough for the Ukrainians in terms of your intention to see Ukraine in NATO?
Well, I'm certainly not going to speak for the Ukrainians, but let me just say that we have no problem holding Russia to account. I don't even want to justify it by saying annoy. We have no problem holding Russia to account, and over the course of this conflict, since their brutal invasion into Ukraine, we have taken a number of steps from export controls, sanctions, to hold the Russian Federation accountable. On top of all that, we of course have offered so much support to our Ukrainian partners when it comes to security assistance, economic assistance, humanitarian assistance. And I will also just note for folks, because I believe you all weren't able to attend because it was a president's trip, but just 2 weeks ago, the president signed a bilateral security agreement with President Zelensky, underlying and reassuring our commitment to the people of Ukraine, because we believe that a commitment such as that one is critical to ensuring Ukraine's security democratically, economically, and in a security sense as well.
So just to be clear, so U.S. wants to see Ukraine in NATO and is not afraid of annoying Putin?
You have seen this Secretary of State and this President talk about how we believe that it is important there be a bridge to Ukraine's membership in NATO. Of course, this bilateral security agreement is not a replacement for that, but it is one of the things that we view as part of that bridge to one day Ukraine being able to join NATO. Look, we have long said that we support and affirm NATO's open door policy.
Thank you. I have two more on the South Caucasus. The Secretary spoke about Georgia today, and he said that we have taken some actions, clearly, to talk about sanctions. The weeks, actually a couple of days after the initial sanctions, first tranche was announced, the reports that Georgia's Security Service chief was in the United States. You also guys have invited Georgia's foreign minister to Washington next week. Aren't you concerned you're sending out mixed messages?
What do you mean, Alex?
By inviting the officials and then telling us that we're sanctioning the officials, imposing visa restrictions.
Well, look, Alex, when it comes to Georgia, and I know we've spent a lot of time in this briefing room talking about some of the legislation that has recently passed. It's important that also we continue to engage with appropriate officials within the Georgian government. It is a country we continue to have a range of issues that we want to prioritize in the context of that bilateral relationship with. And while, of course, when it has come to this specific legislation, you've heard me and Matt talk about the many issues that we have and how we believe it is counter to Georgia's own EU aspirations. We still believe it's important to engage, and there continue to be other issues that we have no doubt we'll talk about with them.
Thank you. And finally, on Azerbaijan, there have been some high-level engagements with Azerbaijan. The Secretary spoke with Aliyev, and last week Jim spent his days in Baku. Is there a concern that these high-level engagements keep happening without securing the release of political prisoners?
Alex, this is a long process, and it requires us to have continued engagement, and it's something that I would expect both the Secretary and Assistant Secretary O'Brien and others to be continue to be focused on. Julia, you've had your hand up. I'll come to you, Michelle, right after. Go ahead, Julia.
I wanted to ask about the reported coup in Bolivia and the reports today that the former president's accusing the president of staging a self-coup to gain popularity. I was wondering what the State Department makes of this allegation and if the posture toward this is changing.
So we're continuing to monitor the situation in Bolivia, as I imagine many in the international community are. we understand and have taken note the number of viewpoints that have emerged in recent days, and we welcome independent analysis into the events of June 26th. What I want to say broadly, though, is that these events in Bolivia make clear that democracy continues to remain fragile in some parts of our hemisphere, and the United States intends to work together in line with the OAS Charter and the Inter-American Democratic Charter to protect the democratic institutions of our countries and other countries.
Are you concerned that if, it does turn out to be a self-coup, that will create even more instability in the area?
We said we'd welcome independent analysis of these events. I will let that process play out first before offering additional perspective. Gita, go ahead.
Thank you. A question on the presidential elections in Iran, Vedant. The government claims that 40% participation, although the diaspora disputes that figure. I was wondering, now, there are two candidates that are going into the second round. One is the well-known hardline Saeed Jalili, and the other one's been presented as a reformist. I was wondering, what is the State Department's overall assessment of the situation and this election?
So first, let me just say, we're not in a position to confirm or any turnout number or speculate on what the implications of that might mean for the Iranian regime. Our viewpoint is that even the Iranian government's official numbers about turnout are like most other things as it relates to the Iranian regime, are unreliable. Our view is that these elections in Iran are not free and fair, and we have no expectation that these elections, and whatever the outcome might be, will lead to a fundamental change in Iran's direction or lead the Iranian regime to offer more respect for human rights and more dignity for its citizens. So I just don't have any prognosis to offer, Gita.
Vedant, as you probably know, the Islamic Republic was allowed to have polling stations here on the U.S. soil. I was wondering what is that decision based on? Is it a treaty? Is it a diplomatic norm to allow another country to have polling stations for their citizens on U.S. soil? Especially that Canada did not allow such a thing, and the U.S. was probably the first country to impose major sanctions on Iran, and has talked about Iran, the Islamic Republic, as being as conducting transnational suppression against the dissidents. So what is the decision to allow another country, especially in a case like Iran, to have polling stations?
I'm happy to check on any technical specifics on how such a process is determined. I'll have to get back to you on that, but let me just say that in this context, foreign governments carrying out election-related activities in the U.S., they need to do so in a manner that is consistent with U.S. law and regulation. We respect the rights of Iranian citizens and the diaspora protesting Iran's elections or choosing to participate in Iran's elections. And I will also just note that the Iranians have conducted this kind of activity in the United States before, so this is nothing new, and as have a number of other governments, especially in the time that I have worked here as well. But I'm happy to check about the specific technical process for you.
Thank you.
When you said that most figures released by the Iranian government are unreliable, does that extend to uranium enrichment, centrifuge, numbers of centrifuges running, oil exports?
Well, I mean, in the context of that question, if you specifically as it relates to its nuclear activities, that is certainly one of the reasons why we have insisted that the Iranian regime appropriately open its door to the IAEA as persistently agreements.
So you would say that it extends to that. You don't believe them on anything.
They do not have a track record of credibility when it comes to
anything.
I think that would be a fair assessment.
Okay.
Yeah. Michelle.
Yeah, can we go back to Israel?
Sure.
Some German newspapers have said today that Israel's invasion of Lebanon is expected to be imminent or in 2 weeks. Do you have any signs that support such prediction?
So I spoke to this a little bit when answering Matt's question. I don't have a prognosis to offer. What I can say is that restoring calm on the blue line is a top priority for the United States, and it's something that we think needs to be of the utmost importance to our partners in Israel and for Lebanon as well. We are concerned by the levels of violence, and we're continuing to work towards a diplomatic solution that would allow Israeli and Lebanese citizens to return home and to live in peace and security. It's our viewpoint, again, that the ceasefire proposal that President Biden laid out when he gave remarks on it, it would accelerate the possibility of progress, and that includes lasting security along Israel's northern border.
And are you aware of any U.S. official or officials going to the region this week to...
I don't have any travel to announce. Jalil.
Thank you much, Vedant. Two on Pakistan, one on Afghanistan. Pakistani Parliament, the Vice Prime Minister said that the U.S. did unsolicited interference when 368 congressmen favored and 7 opposed that the elections were fair. Do you condemn such statement by him? That,
are you talking about the House resolution?
Yes, the House resolution was. So it was a bipartisan. So I hope you can condemn it in a.
So let me just say, as a standard practice, we're not going to speak to pending congressional legislation. I will also note that in the United States of America, in our democratic system, Congress is a separate but co-equal branch of government. Let me just say broadly that when it comes to Pakistan, our most senior officials, whether it be Secretary Blinken, Assistant Secretary Liu, Ambassador Bloom, we have consistently and privately and publicly urged Pakistan to respect the rights of its people in line with its constitution and international commitments. And we urge the government of Pakistan to respect human rights and fundamental freedoms, including the freedom of expression, freedom of association, peaceful assembly, and the freedom of religion as well.
The United Nations Arbitrary Committee for Detention just today said that Imran Khan detention is illegal and fake. And this is one issue that for last 1 year has brought,
Oh, I'm aware.
So, so you don't, from here standing, you don't condemn that election frauds, and you don't condemn Imran Khan detention while the UN is doing it, and your ambassador still has not visited who the congressman. So, where is the State Department standing on so many?
I let the United Nations offer any clarity on the comments that they've provided. And in the case of Mr. Khan, you've heard us say this before. This is an internal matter for Pakistan. I don't have any assessment to offer from us here.
Just last one. Doha's third conference is going, and again, this issue is. I raise it a lot because I'm just living right next to it. There's a common saying, you educate a man, you educate a family, you educate a woman, you educate a whole village. Mm-hmm. In my backyard, another terrorists are going to be raised in coming years, right? Because when their moms are not educated, and you guys are still cooperating with the Taliban. Like, for me to even ask this question is of so much risk.
Jalil, what's your question? And I hope...
So my question is that I feel so bad that while I'm raising this question is the State Department and putting my life at risk while raising such questions, that why is the U.S. giving any sort of support to the Taliban while the third year has started and women are without education?
So we're not. I'm really not sure what your question was there, but how about this? How about I offer a little bit of an update from the Doha 3 conference? To take a step back, Special Representative Tom West and Special Envoy Rina Amiri are attending these UN-convened meetings in Doha on Afghanistan this week, along with closest allies, dozens of countries and international organizations, and others are present. We committed to participating in this after receiving assurances from the UN that the discussion would meaningfully address human rights, particularly the plight of women and girls, and importantly, that there would be opportunities for engagement in Doha with Afghan women.
But Vedant, the women education is not this typical answer that you're reading to me. I'm personally requesting you that, Vedant, when women are not...
If you're going to interrupt me, we're going to stop taking your questions.
You. I just want to
you
phrase it to a little bit simpler.
happy to stop calling on you, Jalil.
No, Vedant,
We
I'm
can
sorry
move
if
on
you're
to
feeling
other
this way.
questions.
I
If you let me
apologize.
finish, and then we've got a couple more hands that
My
I would like to
apologies.
get through.
My apologies.
So, at a session at the Doha 3 conference on the economy, Special Rep West and Special Envoy Amiri also made clear that the Afghan economy cannot grow while half the population's rights are not respected. It is well known that the Taliban's policies are robbing the Afghan economy of over $1 billion per year in GDP. You had your hand in the back, and then sure, go ahead. Yeah.
So the Taliban, one of the Taliban spokesperson tweeted that it was pledged that restrictions on banking and economic avenues should be lifted, citing most countries at the conference supporting that, including the U.S. Is that inaccurate?
So I don't have a specific readout from the conference at the moment, Kylie, but what I can say is that Tom made clear that the primary reason private banks have reservations about doing more business in Afghanistan is reputational, and that it is rooted in the Taliban's atrocious human rights conduct. We know that the Taliban often complains about sanctions, but given the broad general license issued by the Treasury Department, relief organizations as well as businesses have the leeway they need to support the Afghan people.
So no restrictions on the banking and economic avenues that you can that you are aware of at this time.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm happy to check with the team and get back to you if we have a
And
readout.
any update on the Swiss fund that was created more than 2 years ago? Like how much of that money has actually been put to use in the country?
I don't have a breakdown, but we're happy to check with the team.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The Islamic Resistance Front in Iraq announced on Sunday that it will target U.S. interests if a conflict erupts between Israel and Hezbollah. What is your position and your response?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the first part of your question. Who?
The Islamic Resistance Front in Iraq announced on Sunday that it will target U.S. interests if a conflict erupts between Israel and Hezbollah.
So first, let me just say, since October 7th, when we look at the whole region, the United States has prioritized de-escalation and ensuring that this conflict doesn't spread. That continues to be the case. When it comes to Iraq, though, we expect and fully intend to work closely with our partners in Iraq, and this is something that Mr. Soudani and other leaders across the government in Iraq have also made clear that they would intend to hold interests or groups that choose to target American interests accountable, and that's something that we'll continue to push for as well. Jackson, go ahead.
Thanks, the Secretary Brookings said that we should expect an announcement at the NATO summit regarding economic support for Ukraine. What would that look like? Can you specify what he meant?
No, because I'm not going to get ahead of the Secretary, and you all should tune into the NATO summit next week.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Last week, the House Republicans in the Congress, they introduced an amendment to the foreign appropriating bill which says that if it's passed, that it would designate Iraqi Supreme Judicial Council and its president as an Iranian-controlled asset. I understand that you are not commenting on the pending bill, but my question is on the reactions from Iraq. Foreign Minister and also the acting Parliament Speaker, the President of Iraq, they reacted to this amendment, and they said that, which the acting Parliament said that if this passed, it will be a dangerous turning point in Baghdad and Washington relations. What's your comment to this reactions?
So let me just again reiterate what you said. I'm not going to comment on pending legislation with Congress. What I can say, though, is that that is not the kind of relationship we believe that we have with the government of Iraq. And over the course of our relationship, there are a number of areas in which we have worked closely with them, especially in the security and counterterrorism space, as well as energy and energy infrastructure, and we'll continue to work with them and deepen our cooperation on those areas.
And what's the U.S. administration position on Iraq's Supreme Judicial Council and also its president? Do you think that it's an independent body or it's an Iranian-controlled asset?
I'm happy to check back with the team for you. I don't have anything specific on that. Go ahead, and then we'll got a couple more that we're going to wrap.
Spoke about the resolution passed in the House regarding Pakistan, but please correct me if I'm wrong. State Department also raised same questions regarding the credibility of Pakistani elections held in this year, and asking for the investigation of reports on massive rigging in those elections. You still asking those questions from the Pakistani government?
This is something that we have continued to raise with our partners in Pakistan. Yes, that continues to be an area of focus of ours.
So the Department of Homeland Security has identified over 400 immigrants from Central Asia and other regions as subjects of concern due to their entry into the U.S. through an ISIS-linked human smuggling network. What measures are being taken to mitigate this threat and ensure national security?
So we're aware of this report, and this is something that my colleagues at the Department of Homeland Security can speak to in more detail. Let me just say, though, that we work very closely with international counterparts, including our partners in Central Asia, on issues like counterterrorism partnerships, exchange information on potential threats, and as well as improving screening capabilities. But
would you say something about
to that more.
So would you say something about the multiple bombings in Nigeria, like more than 50 people dead, more than 100 are injured?
So we condemn this horrific attack that took place in Borno on June 29th. These attacks show a disregard of human life and a reminder of the ongoing threat posed by terrorism in the region. We offer our condolences to the families of those killed and wish a full recovery to those who were injured. Goyal, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Quick question. This debate have been going on in India and also in the US, and even during Modi's second term, Modi 2, and now it continues Modi 3. As far as US-India relations are concerned, because of some countries don't have a good relation with the US because they support terrorism and all those things like Iran and North Korea and among others. But India or Modi is friends with them, or they deal with them because of the national needs of India, including with Iran and also with the Soviet Union, with Mr. Putin, with Russia. So how are you going to deal with India-US relations in this midst of, because there are sanctions against those countries, but India or Modi is saying that we have a national need and we have to deal with them in our own. But as far as US relations are concerned, we are with the US and we will be with the US because largest democracy on the globe and the oldest democracy on the globe, and now we celebrate, of course, the 4th of July. So where do we stand?
So let me just say, this is something this should be not new to you, Goyal, that India is a country in which we are deepening our relations with in a number of key spaces, especially as it relates to deepening our economic ties, deepening our security cooperation. The president had the opportunity to briefly see Prime Minister Modi on the margins of the G7 a couple of weeks ago. So this is an area we will continue to cultivate this relationship. You are no stranger to the fact that we hosted India for a state visit last summer, and I imagine there'll be a number of additional areas where we continue to deepen cooperation. National Security Advisor Sullivan just had a visit to Delhi a number of weeks ago as well.
And second, sir, thank you. Prime Minister Modi have been trying even during his second term that India wants a good relation with Pakistan, neighboring country, because if we have good neighbors and we prosper and all that, India, and Modi said that now time have come for Pakistan to develop for needs of their people, national needs, not just for military and not corruptions and all that. What I'm asking you now, because still now Mr. Sharif or Jaz Sharif have been trying to say that we not want to have good relation with India, but India is saying, as in the last 5 years, that terrorism and talks cannot go together. Pakistan have to condemn terrorism fully against India. Is still going on. So where do we stand as for a triangle US-India, US-Pakistan, and India-US relations?
Well, we would hope that any country on the face of the planet condemns terrorism anywhere, but ultimately this is between India and Pakistan. Broadly, of course, we welcome any countries making more positive relations with their neighbors, but as it relates to this specifically, I just don't have anything to offer.
Thank you.
Many women journalists in Israel who were reporting this weekend on the protest of ultra-Orthodox Jews against the Supreme Court's order to enlist them for military service have complained publicly about insults and violence from these protesters who called them whores, among more insults. What is your reaction to these insults, to this violence towards women journalists?
So first, let me just say, any kind of violence or insult to journalists who are just doing their job, in this instance, covering some protests, is fully unacceptable. Time and time again, you've heard us say that we believe it's important and imperative for journalists to be able to do their job, especially in this region of the world. But beyond that, I don't have, as it relates to the protests itself, I don't have anything. That is it's an internal matter for the government of Israel, but unequivocally, journalists need to be able to do their jobs, and insults, name-calling, and any kind of violence is unacceptable. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.